Atheist Experience. Today is Sunday, January 20th, 2019, and I'm your host, Tracie Harrison. With me today is my very special guest, Mandisa Thomas.
I'm so glad to be here.
It's so great to see you.
It's so great to see you again, and welcome to the studio audience. Thank you all so very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I feel like you're doing us a favor. So the Atheist Experience is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a Texas nonprofit educational organization dedicated to promoting separation of church and state and positive atheist culture. People are invited to join us after the show today at the ACA studio, which is also the Free Thought Library on Canning Lane here in Austin, right after the show at, I guess we're 4:30 to 6, so sometime after 6 o'clock if you want to show up and have some food. I also have a whole lot of announcements. So first of all, I'm told we have hit 250,000 subscribers. And so I just want to thank everybody for the support. Just incredible to hear. And congratulations to us. And again, couldn't have done it without every one of those subscribers. So thank you. And also, we are fundraising today. So you're here on behalf of Black Nonbelievers, and
Correct.
we have their website linked at the blog, and I think they also have some information they're going to post on screen for the website for Black Nonbelievers, and there's donate potential through that website, through PayPal, and also through an email, donations@blacknonbelievers.org. And again, at the blog, I have also linked to the Black Nonbelievers page, and you're welcome to go there if you want to show your support.
Yes, and even more than that, we have two very important events coming up this year. The first is the first ever Women of Color Beyond Belief conference, which will take place in Chicago from October 4th through the 6th. It will be the first ever conference that will feature speakers, leaders, and organizers that are women of color in the movement, which, of course, is something we don't see enough of at many events. And so this is a conference that is open to everyone.
Right.
And we hope that you will support, attend, and learn from us, learn about what we can do better in the movement, and also the very important issues that do impact our communities, whether we realize them or not. And secondly, we have our third annual cruise convention, which is now titled BNCCon, which will take place from November 10th through the 16th, sailing out of Miami, Florida. And I am proud to announce that Phil Session has agreed to be one of the speakers.
That's going to be awesome.
So he will be joining us this year. It is going to be very fun, very informative. And, I'm looking forward to hearing him speak and also introducing our members and attendees to his activism and his passion for it. And, we've known Phil for a couple of years, and we've seen his progression on the Atheist Experience and his activism. And we just want everyone to know, what he does, and also to introduce everyone to what we do as an organization and what we contribute to the community. And we are growing, and we need your support as well. And I'd like to thank ACA and you, Tracie, and everyone here for just all the support and love you've shown us. So thank you all very much in advance, and do please support Black Nonbelievers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the first lessons that I learned from Black Nonbelievers was you don't have to be Black to support Black Nonbelievers. To join,
Correct.
I mean, it's not an exclusive club. It's a club that is meant to help a specific demographic that has unique problems, some of which would be
dealing with the still high, very level of religion within the Black community. The church still has a very, very powerful influence, which does make it that much more difficult to have the conversation surrounding leaving religion, as well as openly identifying as atheist, agnostic, humanist, etc. And also dealing with other notions that we engage, that we experience within the secular community, understanding that there are privileges and notions that people have that they do need to combat, and also resolving issues of diversity and inclusion within the secular community, and realizing that, in addition to being atheists, and which is something that we all deal with,
right?
Right?
That's a common thing, but
correct.
what's not common is
the growing number of people of color who are considered minorities, women who are coming into the movement, and leaving religion. And in order for us to have a sustainable community and maintain it, there are some things that we need to address and resolve. And so this is what Black Nonbelievers does as an organization, and we work with other organizations too. And this is why we say, you don't have to be Black to support us and also participate with us. We hope that everyone, I will say that at our events, they actually represent what the community and most conventions and conferences look like, what they should look like.
Sure.
So, we just encourage you to just participate more with us. It's not that we're totally different, but there are some unique issues that we do address.
Yeah. And it is just, there's a nice feeling to go somewhere and see some folks that look like you, right? Instead of never seeing people that look like you, like all the time. So yeah, definitely if you're in a position where everywhere you go, most of the people look like you, it may be hard to wrap your brain around what it's like to walk everywhere and hardly ever see somebody that's like you, unless you're just within your tight-knit community where you're kind of, hold up for that reason. So you're kind of like a minority community within a minority community that is mostly religious.
Correct.
And that makes it really tough.
It does, but we are fighting the good fight. We are helping, we are building that support mechanism and also bridging those gaps. And we are amplifying the voices who once felt like they didn't have them. So, we are continuing to, continuing to do this work. And we are expanding. We are starting an affiliate in the Richmond, Virginia area, which makes it our 14th affiliate across the United States. So I'm happy to see the growth that we've, that we've developed over the years. And
awesome.
So, yeah.
And you're also on board of directors of American Atheists.
I am still. I also serve as the chair of the board nominating committee for the American Humanist Association.
All right.
So, I guess I do have some sort of tentacles within the community.
And you host one of our other programs.
Yes, that is Parenting Beyond Belief every fourth Saturday.
You are busy.
So, yes, I am.
Busy human being.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And that was just spinning off of one of the announcements. That was we still have more announcements. So just really quickly going through the rest. So for Valentine's Day in Austin, Secular Sexuality show is going to be followed by a Shelley Siegel concert at Chateau Bellevue, which is here in Austin. Tickets are going to be $30 per person. And also, we want to announce that Godless Bitches, our episode of the Women's March here in Austin that we just filmed yesterday, feels like already a week ago, but it was just yesterday, and they're going to have that editing done and have that show up literally by tomorrow. So we're announcing that because it normally comes out on a Saturday, so just FYI, we are going to be posting that sometime tomorrow. So that's amazing that they were able to get that edited, and we'll get that out within just a day or two. And also our January edition of the ACA newsletter is out. It's being produced also in German, I've been told, and it can be accessed through social media. Yeah, I asked, why German? And they said, we're going to start putting it out in any language we can get it out in. So good enough. I guess they're starting with German, and they're going to just work from there.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then we also... Let's see, we have a lot of other shows. I think the last time I was on, which seems like forever ago, I had said, you can have shows. And we do have other shows that are put out by the Atheist Experience Network. And that was, as I mentioned, Mandisa is also hosting Parenting Beyond Belief on that. And I'm on this show, the Atheist Experience, and also Godless Bitches. And we have other folks that y'all are familiar with that are on many of the other programs. So lots of content is going out. I also want to just quickly announce on upcoming shows that I'm going to be hosting with Phil Ferguson on February 3rd. So if you're, follow Phil on his podcast, his financial podcast, that might be something you want to tune in for. And also, Shelley Siegel is going to be sitting with us as well on the show on the 17th. So she'll be doing Secular Sexuality, and then she's going to be doing the concert, and then she'll be sitting with us in a couple days after that. So we're making good use of her.
I love Shelley.
Yeah.
I've actually put together a few shows in the Atlanta area for her.
Oh,
and
cool.
I've met her a couple of times. She's a wonderful singer and puts on a great show. So I highly encourage you to attend her show here.
Okay. Thanks so much. And I think that was it for my list of stuff, which, this is a big day for announcements. So do we have anything else? Or I guess I had one other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit today. So I won't belabor this too much. And I know people are like, sometimes we get fatigue from controversies online. And that's easy to happen. And I understand because I get fatigued about them too. So recently there was this thing with a Native American drummer and some kids from Covington Catholic High School, and it first came out and people got upset, and then came out the counter narrative and people got upset and people were arguing and getting upset, and then there was this other insert of this other group that was involved in some way, and we had lots of conversations on social media about this event. And ultimately, one thing that I learned, and just like, if I can learn one thing from something, and change something about myself that helps me to become a better person, then I consider it kind of worthwhile. And the one thing I learned here was that I was harboring Native American racism against that group, and I wasn't aware of it. And I want to talk a little bit about it because I may not be the only person in the room on this. And I know that on my wall, there were some other people with other ideas that I felt were doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. So what it boiled down to was people were posting the videos and expanded videos, and here's the 10-minute video, and here's the 20-minute video, and here's the video of BHI, and here's the video of the kids, and here's the video of the Indian coming up the steps. And I mean, it was just wild. And I was looking at all of this, and I kept looking at it, and I was like, it just looks like he's trying to get through the group, and he's having trouble navigating or negotiating through the group. Like, he's going up the steps, and then suddenly he's, confronted by people. And there were other people who were saying, no, he's going up there and aggressively drumming, right? Yeah, I don't know what that means, but he's aggressively drumming and getting in these kids' faces. And so there was this, ongoing sort of back and forth about, is he just trying to navigate through this crowd at a rally, or is he being aggressive toward these students? What's going on here? And finally, in all the things that I was stopping and reading and stopping and watching, like every time somebody posted an article, somebody posted a video, I would let me stop and look at it and see if this changes my view. And ultimately, someone posted an interview, like an audio interview with the drummer. Mm-hmm. And he was describing what occurred. And what he was saying is they were packing up the Indigenous Peoples March. They had completed it. They were packing things up. And as they were packing, they saw this little bit of a back and forth of shouting match happening over on the steps or near the steps. And it was kind of minor at first, and then it started to escalate, and then more and more people started to get involved. And there were some people that were posting things about, like every specific of what he was describing wasn't accurate. And I'm like, he wasn't really looking at it like he wasn't planning to witness for it in a court of law later. He was packing up his stuff, and he's kind of just noticing, and he's just given his take on, this is what I thought I was looking at, right? Mm-hmm. So here's what I thought I saw. As groups are getting, but the main things was the people were becoming more numerous, and the aggression was seeming to escalate.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that does the drum. So they're packing up the stuff, and he sees the drum, and something I learned is that the drum in Native American culture actually represents a way to gain attention for God. All right, so you can get God's attention by drumming. And there's also some unity aspects to it. And I did look this up on other Native American Indian resource sites. And yes, they talk about that this is how, you can get the spirit, and you can get the God, and you can get the unity and the ancestors. And, they had different ways of looking at it, because just like any groups of people, you're going to have different takes on it. But ultimately, he wasn't just making up that this is a method that we use to get God's attention. That was his way of expressing it.
Right.
And he thought that if he would go and take the drum and do the drum for that area where the people were getting angry and where the people were collecting more and more, that maybe this could get the attention of the God, and it could cause unity of the spirit, and they could de-escalate this thing. And so he's approaching people, and he's approaching this group, and he's drumming. He's drumming madly to get the attention of God, right? Mm-hmm. And here I am basically saying, oh, he's trying to get up there to do this ceremony, and then he's being blocked. And other people are going, no, he's trying to, make crap with these kids and get in these kids' faces and be really aggressive. And it turns out that what he was doing was the cultural equivalent of like a couple Christians going over there holding hands and just praying for peace. It was that aggressive, right? It's like that bad.
Right.
And when I realized what he was doing, in that moment, what I realized was that I was putting my cultural view of it, right? I was ignoring the drum. There was a drum, the guy's drumming, and it didn't occur to me to say, this is unusual. What does that drum mean? What is the significance of the guy is not just walking, he's drumming. He's got this ceremonial thing that he's doing, and what does that mean? And it didn't occur to me to ask whether or not that would be significant to this event where I'm looking at something that's very different than a normal thing from my cultural perspective.
Well, what was also interesting about that is that even if you didn't know about the significance of the drum at the time, this gentleman wasn't going over there shouting. He wasn't going over there really being antagonistic. He wasn't going there shooting. There was nothing that indicated that this gentleman deserved any vitriol that he ultimately received.
Yeah. I mean, there was like mockery, like mocking and stuff going on. But for me, I think the takeaway was the way that I was so quick to sort of assign motivations and assign a cultural context, which was completely ignorant of the cultural context of the person I was judging, right?
Right.
And other people were doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's all this sideline devolution of, but who, were there more people gathering here, or was this crowd doing that? And it's like, it doesn't matter. He's not really, he's just saying, this is why I went over there. He's not trying to make points about who's right, who's wrong. He's just saying, this is what I was doing.
Right.
And, in the meantime, somebody posted and they said, well, are you saying that not knowing all the ins and outs of someone else's culture is racist? That's racism? And I said, no, I'm saying what's racist is when you start making judgments based on your cultural ignorance of a situation, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't make a judgment, that you can't become informed and still make a judgment, right? So, for example, there are a lot of atheists who were ex-believers that come out of all sorts of religious backgrounds. And a lot of times they feel like, hey, I have a really strong understanding of that culture that I left, and I feel like I can judge it.
Correct.
Because I have a different perspective now, but I still understand that perspective. I understood it when I was in it. I haven't lost that knowledge. I haven't lost that understanding, and I understand now why it's wrong.
Right.
So just being culturally more informed about something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be accepting of it. I'm not even saying that you have to culturally inform yourself, make your judgment valid, and that necessarily means you're going to have to offer understanding in a sense of I accept what you're doing. You can still reject what the person is doing. You can
but
reject.
It is still best to be informed.
Right. No. Yeah.
And not to just make statements off the cuff when you really don't understand what they're about.
Right. And in this case, it contributes what I was doing and what other people were doing. When you have those kinds of judgments and arguments that these people are being basically the pawns in, that is racist because they are people that deal with racism, and we are the people that are basically saying it's okay to argue about their situation and their context without knowing jack crap about their situation and their context. Now, people could also call it xenophobic if they want to, and I'm okay with that too. I'll be the first one to say, yeah, label me xenophobic because that's what I was doing too. I'm not going to hide from it, right? And I just wanted to kind of share that out, that I learned something about myself. Hopefully I became, a little bit better today, and I hope that some other people can become a little bit better today. If,
we can only hope, yes.
So anyway, that was kind of that's my whole, what I cared about on that. And so we do have some callers. And Tim was actually nice enough to help us out with our phone check earlier. So we've got, Jim in California. And you just want to discuss the existence of God. And you're on with Tracie and Mandisa. Jim?
All right. Hi.
Hey.
All right. So I wanted to talk about the existence of God. And the argument I want that I think is probably the best case for theism is personally the Kalam cosmological argument.
We just got a collective, sort of gah from the audience. And I think the reason is that that's been addressed like lots and lots. Do you have something new to add about it, like something that hasn't been rehashed like a million times, or is this just going to be the same conversation that's been had like a million times?
Well, I mean, it could be the same conversation. Or
do you have something new that we haven't heard that's like, hey, I've listened to the show and you've addressed this, but I think you're not understanding a certain aspect of it that I'd like to address? Or is this just going to be, let's talk about Kalam again?
What does this have to do with let's talk about Kalam again?
Okay, why do you want to have this conversation again?
Well, I mean, because I've never heard you guys talk about the Kalam before. But then again, I don't watch you guys usually. All
right, well, let's just talk we'll give it a few minutes and just see how it goes. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, the Kalam uses mainly two premises in support of its conclusion.
Yeah, everything is it everything that begins to exist, has a cause, right?
With existence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything that begins to exist has a cause, and then the cause is special pleaded to not have to need a cause. Is that right?
Well, no, because the cause. The second premise of the Kalam argues for a metric beginning, a beginning for time. So whatever caused time would be prior to time itself, making it immutable.
Why is it immutable?
And atemporal.
Why is it immutable? How do you know anything about the time before time?
Well, I never said time before time.
Well, you said that there was a time when time began. Wait, there's a time when time began, right?
No, I said prior to time.
Right, so how is there a prior to time if there's not a time when time began?
Well, the prior I'm talking about here is like the greater than and less than relationship you find in mathematics. It's not a tensed fact. Like when I say, for example...
Right, but I mean, what we're basically saying is that there was a point at which our universe began, and that's when we sort of start cataloging time, right? Right?
Well, no.
No?
The Kalam offers that an infinite amount of temporal regress is impossible.
We don't know. I don't know. I know nothing about before this universe, right? Like, all I know is that we don't have any way to gauge what occurred or how to assign metrics, or we don't know anything about how to judge what the case was before this universe began. Right? That's what Hawking says in his Beginning of Time lecture, is that we might as well write those things out of the story because we don't have any information about them, and right now there's no way to get information about them, so we can't say anything informed about what was going on before our universe and before time began, so we might as well start from there. Right?
Well, but we can argue for certain properties at least.
I don't think we can. I mean, you can argue for them, but you can't test for them, and so you're just simply asserting things, and we have no way to confirm them. Right?
Well, I would disagree there.
Okay, how do we confirm anything you're going to say?
Through logic.
That's not a confirmation. That's a hypothesis, right? So if you start using logic, it's going to probably be based on realities that we're confronted with in this universe. Right? I mean, how would it not be? What else are you going to base it on? Realities that exist somewhere else that we can't have access to?
Well, a priori intuition. I mean, mathematics is something.
I don't.
It sounds more.
I mean,
like
I would think that
else.
Hawking understands mathematics, and he's basically said that we can't really gauge those events. Now, there may be somebody in physics working on some aspect of how to gauge those events. I'm not qualified to talk about that, but I just know, like I said, Hawking says you can't really discuss them with any sort of informed way, and I have a feeling he understood math.
Well, he might have understood math, but he may not have understood the ontology of mathematics. That's something more philosophers are.
Right, but this isn't a philosophy question. It's a science question. Right? What existed before this universe is a question for cosmologists. Isn't it? Have you talked to any cosmologists about this? Have you talked to any physicists like astrophysics, or you've written to a university department of astrophysics to see if anybody there is willing to answer questions for you on this? What have they said? Have you talked to anybody with a degree in this that could answer these questions in an informed way? Or did you just call an atheist show?
Besides these ad hom attacks.
I'm not. It's not an ad. When did I attack you? When did I attack you? What did I say that was like an attack or an insult on you? I asked questions and I wasn't jacking off. I was literally saying, like, for example, there's been times I've needed to know things where I had questions about things I was reading or things I didn't understand, and I would reach out to like somebody who was head of a department in a university who dealt with that. One of them was like, I was reading the Icelandic sagas and I had some questions about why they had certain laws. And I didn't just call some weird show. I literally went to somebody who had a degree, who was heading up a department. I said, are you willing to give me a few minutes of your time to talk to me about my questions about this? Because I don't understand it. And they were willing to do it. If they hadn't been, I'd have gone to somebody else. But I'm going to go to somebody who's able to do it. It's like somebody who has questions about evolution calling the show instead of talking to a biologist. Now, if you've talked to a biologist and you want to talk to me about what they told you or whatever, we can have that conversation, but I can't really cross-check biologists. But it's the same with this. I mean, if this is about cosmology and I'm asking you, have you ever spoken to somebody who actually has a degree in this field that could answer these questions before you called the show? I think that's a fair question.
Right, but the thing is, my arguments in support of an actual infinite or against an actual infinity is more based on metaphysical arguments.
Right, but you need to talk to the people that deal with the actual hard facts about this, because they're the ones that can tell you whether your metaphysical arguments are holding water in reality. They're the ones that study this. Why would you not go and see what the science behind this actually has to say before you would call an atheist show? Why wouldn't you look up the scientific rebuttals to this thing before you would call us to talk about it? Why don't you want to know what actual experts in this field know? This is a science question. It's not a philosophical question. It's a science question. You can philosophize about it all day long, but if you're saying things and they're wrong, I have no way to check them against a reality because I don't know how to look at the reality of before time. How would I check anything you're saying? How can I go and validate it? How could I verify? What would I hold it up against to look at and say, yes, this is what happened before time? How do I know? How do we know? Even if it feels intuitively good to us, how do we know it's accurate? And even if it matches things that make sense in this universe to us and seems reasonable based on this universe, whatever happened before time began isn't going to conform to the rules and regulations and the requirements of this universe. So we're talking really out of our depth here, I think.
But none of that is against the inference that something that is prior to time is atemporal.
I don't know what would be prior to time. I don't know if there was time prior to time. I don't know what there would be. And if somebody tells me it's a certain way, I don't know. No, I'm not saying that you did. I'm saying I don't know how I would check it. You can say it and we can talk about it, but we're not really going to be able to get anywhere. We're talking about things that are not falsifiable and that would be like intuitively accepted based on knowledge of a universe that has no real relevance to the question. I mean, is this even making sense? Like, do you understand what I'm saying as far as my objection to... I feel bad because it's like, it sounds like I'm saying I don't even want to talk about, but what I'm trying to do is make you understand that we could talk all day about it and we'll never be able to resolve anything because there's no way to verify anything you're going to say because we don't have access to the information to check it.
Right, but I mean, the objection that you're giving, like time prior to time, doesn't even make coherent sense.
I'm just simply saying that but before time doesn't need to make coherent sense is, I guess, part of my point. Because it doesn't make coherent sense based on our knowledge of this universe doesn't mean that it can't make sense like in whatever would be before time. What I'm saying is that we can't use this universe to make assumptions about that, because what happens in this universe is can't be trusted to be how it would work. It would have been so vastly different that there's no way to confirm, looking at what makes sense in this universe, that our assumptions about something that would be before this universe would make sense.
So, from what I can understand from your objection is that any talk we can make prior to the universe may not make unintelligible sense, and therefore it's useless to posit it.
I'm saying you can posit it if you want, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be back to the beginning. You're not going to have learned anything. You're just going to have thought things through based on what you think makes sense. And then at the end of it, if people agree with you, you both think it makes sense, and you could both be totally wrong, and there's no way to verify it. The question would be whether or not you could get a hold of somebody in the field of physics who is investigating some way of accessing information about whatever was before this universe. That's what you're looking for, and that would be a super high-end physics. I mean, that wouldn't be just like your run-of-the-mill, let's get a plastic bottle full of water and put some floaters in it and do some, weekend tests with the kids. These are people that are really going to be on the edge of it. And I would recommend, I guess, if this is a field that interests you, or if this is something that you're really interested in, that's what I would look for. I have heard that some people are looking into that type of physics, but I'm not a physicist and I don't know that much about it. And I can ask people at the blog if you know of any people that are working on this, or physicists who are involved in this, departments at universities that might be involved in it. And don't think I'm being facetious. I have had professors and researchers get back to me on stuff and answer my questions. And I'll be honest with you. There have been a few times people have written back and just told me to go blow myself, and that, they have no time for me. So you can get a crappy response from an asshole. But you can also get people who are just like, oh, sure, I love this stuff. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And I would really recommend getting a hold of a person who has devoted their life to this type of research, and especially somebody that's very interested in whatever would be the cutting edge on how do we try to determine what would happen in, before time, which, if there's people looking into that, that would be the people you probably would want to talk to if you really want to know what is it that we can know about that.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, anything prior to time, or anything talking about outside of time, doesn't have to make logically coherent sense, but somehow science, as if scientific theories don't need to make coherent sense, will somehow give the explanation.
No, I'm saying that there are people who are, I have heard that there are people who are trying to look into ways to be able to understand what may have happened before time. I don't know anything really about it. I'm just saying I've heard that, because there's been times when I've put forward that we don't know anything about it, and other people have said, well, there's these people working on this thing here, and they say that you can look into certain aspects of it. And I don't really know what their scientific theories or their natural philosophy explanations would be for how you can do that. It might be that other scientists are like, hey, I think it's a crock of crap, and I don't agree with what they're doing over here in this research. I don't know. And consensus would be really important, right? So if you did find people that were studying that, and then a huge swath of the rest of the people in the field were just like, yeah, that's a bunch of crap, I wouldn't necessarily lean too hard on it. You might be interested in looking at it because it sounds like something that interests you personally, but at the same time, you'd want to be careful, because just because something is high-end and very scientific doesn't necessarily mean that other people that are working in that field agree with how that methodology is being executed. Does that make sense? Or not?
I mean, here's the thing. From what I understood is that you dismiss my claim that the cause of these years can be atemporal based on the sense that...
I'm not dismissing. I'm saying we don't know. I don't know how to check it. If you make a claim about whatever existed or didn't, whatever was before time, I don't know how to confirm it. And so I don't know what to do with that information.
Well, I mean, there is one way you could do it. I mean, if you could prove, for example, the universe had always existed, then there would be no need to posit for a temporal.
Okay, but as far as I know, the prevailing theories are that there was a beginning to what we consider to be our universe. The only question is what happened before, and as far as I know, that has not been answered. There may be people looking into it, I'm not sure, but if this is an area that interests you, those would be the people that could give you the best information about it. That's where I would suggest you start your research, not in a philosophy book.
Right, especially if you're coming onto this show and perhaps providing some sort of counter for, I guess, or maybe, are you asking this question because you truly do believe in the existence of a God? I'm trying to understand exactly why you called asking about this.
Is this what convinced you that there's a God? Like, did you not believe in God and then you heard Kalam and then you started believing?
Well, yes, actually.
Okay.
And there we go.
And did you check that against people who actually are expert in the field to see if they agreed that it was a reasonable conclusion?
Right, but what I don't see is why are you guys so dismissive on philosophy?
No, I'm dismissive. What I'm trying to do, and I'm doing a bad job of it, is to avoid a conversation that results in nothing fruitful. So what you're basically trying to say is let's have a conversation about this thing that at the end of the day, no matter where it goes, and even if I agree with everything you're saying, we have no way to confirm it. And we're still at, we don't know. This makes a lot of sense to us, but we don't know if it's true. We don't know what to compare it against.
Right,
what would we compare it against?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the people that would have to confirm it are the people I'm saying that you might want to go and talk to. What good is it to have a lot of information that you can't falsify? I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some people who have fun simply sitting around and talking about stuff and they don't care. I mean, like, for example, I forget what they're called, but they're like these thought experiments, I guess, where people are just talking about what if this and what if that and sometimes there's real world implications and sometimes not so much. And they just enjoy, hypotheticals. But at the end of the day, if we're just going to go down Kalam and then at the end of it, it's like, even if I agree with you and said, oh yeah, that's a really interesting hypothesis that, results in a God, at the end of it, how do we confirm that? And then we're back to square one. I don't know. It intuitively, seems right, but I don't know what to do with that information because I can't confirm it. And what I'm saying is it seems to make sense to me that if somebody's like, it's just like if somebody heard creationist arguments, for example, and they were just like, wow, these are really compelling, and they call the show. And my thought would be, did you call biologists first? Did you talk to somebody with a PhD in genetics? But did you even reach out or try to get a hold of somebody that could answer those questions before you called the show? Because that's who if you really have an interest and you really find it compelling, I would think you would check with people that have devoted their lives to studying it and see if they think that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you, I guess, is my question. Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think that analogy is comparable. Because, first of all, if we look at, why creationists believe what they do, they operate on the basis that the universe is causally open and then there's an outside force acting on the world.
Not necessarily. You could be a deist creationist, couldn't you? Isn't that what deists are? God started it and now he's not involved? He's not acting on it? Or it's not acting? I guess.
But that's not an objection at all.
I'm not saying it's an objection to anything. I'm just saying that if somebody was a creationist or if they believed in, for example, young Earth creationism, I would think that before calling the show, they should at least look into the scientific counter-arguments against what it is they're putting forward.
Well, I don't think they make it on the basis of natural law. Natural law operates that the universe is a causally closed system.
But the laws within this universe would not be applicable to anything outside the universe. Like, we wouldn't know if they would apply previously or not. There is no way to know that.
My objection is referring to what you mentioned, the biological arguments. right, which is in the universe. So that objection wouldn't work.
No, I'm not. The only objection I'm making, if you want to call it that, is that if you have an interest in a particular topic that has entire fields of research behind it, what would be your objection to actually reaching out to those researchers to ask their views on it? I just don't understand why that's even a problem for me to ask that, or why that wouldn't have been something you'd do if this is really something that interests you.
Well, the thing is, I don't have any problems with that.
Okay, have you done it?
I had any problem with it.
Have you done it? I mean, isn't it a logical step? Like if somebody really, really has a big interest in horses and their entire worldview revolves around horses, and I say to them, have you ever gone to talk to somebody who, understands horses? And they're just like, no. I thought I'd call an atheist show about it. It's like, if your whole worldview hinges on this aspect of reality, and there are people who have literally devoted their lives to it for decades, and you haven't even spoken to them, I think that's a fair question for me to be kind of head scratching about. Why not?
Well, because on the basis of metaphysics.
So what? So tell them, hey, on the basis of metaphysics, I think the time before, or not the time before, but whatever was before time, necessitates a God. What do you think? Hawking says no, it doesn't. But there might be other physicists, who have published papers saying that it does. I've not seen them. But these people would be able to tell you if there is any scientific validity, any aspect of measurable reality that aligns with your conclusions or even your assumptions that lead to those conclusions. Like when you're telling them, wouldn't it be temporal? Well, they can answer you on that. They can say whether we can say that or not. I can't even say that.
And then you can call the show to say what the research that you found as to what they said, and whether or not it either confirms or contradicts with what anyone on the show would say. But you haven't even done that.
I don't even know that the show would have opinions on it. I mean, it might even be better to post at the blog because there'd be a lot more people that would have backgrounds in this than people on the show here that really aren't that into physics. I mean, but I do think that if this is an area that interests you and you've got questions about or you have opinions about whatever was before time, the people to talk to would be the people that are saying, here's when time started and here's what we can or can't say about that. Like that would seem to me the first people that I would reach out to if I was starting to have ideas on this and I was interested in it. I don't know what else to add. I mean, if you want to post at the blog about it, you can post at the blog about it, but I would really encourage you to talk to people who spend their lives looking at whatever they would consider evidence for this area of study and see what they're saying if this is something that impacts you a lot and that you feel is, that interesting. I mean, can you do that?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I would encourage you to do it. It's not, please don't feel bad. I don't mind the call. And I honestly feel like this was a productive discussion, despite the fact that we didn't get into the apologetics. I don't mind the call at all. And I'm sorry that there's I understand your disappointment. But I really think you would do better to talk to people who also are interested in this and who also have researched it and who can kind of help you to cross-check your views on it and either confirm or not. And I'm not sending you there saying they're going to tell you you're full of crap because I don't know. I've never put it forward to, physicists. Hey, what do you think of Kalam? So, I mean, I think it would be interesting for you to reach out to them and just say, look, I'm a believer and I hear this argument and, what are your thoughts or what is known or can you point me to some research? And if somebody writes you back and they're rude about it, then that's just somebody that couldn't be bothered. But don't give up. Go to someone else. I can almost guarantee you that you will, pretty quickly find somebody who's willing to say, hey, here's some information that you might find useful. I mean, good luck with that, and I think that's all we can do. And I'm sorry that it wasn't quite the conversation you were, looking for. But I think that what I could have offered would not have been productive. So I want to thank Jim in California, and we're going to go ahead and move on with this to go to, why not? Let's just go to, we've got Dan in Brooklyn, New York, and they've got a weird one for you here as far as the description. And you're on with Tracie and Mandisa, and it says here that you have a friend, somebody that you went out with that thought she should be able to kill babies after they're born. Is that correct?
Yeah, I know. It's so hard to believe. As it was happening, I was like, I really got to find a way to talk to Tracie about
I can
this,
probably guarantee you that I'm going to side with you on this one, but let's, just for grins, let's spend a minute just hearing it.
On that.
Yeah, so I'll just give a very quick background. Basically,
sure.
I had never met this girl in person before. It was through a dating app. I just, went on a date. And
was it like killmybaby.com? Like,
it was just a normal like Tinder dating app. And so what happened was,
well, now I feel bad because people do kill infants, and so maybe that was flip. And so I felt bad kind of immediately after I just made that joke. So FYI, it's not funny I mean, people are laughing at it now and I'm apologizing. And it's like, seriously, it's not funny to kill babies. And maybe that was a joke that I should have thought before it came out. So I apologize to people if that was offensive. And Dan, please proceed.
Sure. So we had talked a little bit about philosophy, and it sort of came up out of like, what's some controversial opinion that you have? And I was like, well, we probably are on the same page about a lot of things. I mentioned
I don't like chocolate ice cream. What's yours?
But, yeah. And then she was like, well, here's something that I have. I think that you should be able to, if you determine after a child is born, if they have like a severe problem that, then hers sort of ranged from, some disease that caused you to...
I'm going to say it doesn't matter. I'm going to say that it doesn't matter to me.
So, well, I agree with you. I'm not trying to make your point.
She's basically saying if it's something I really don't want,
then you should be able to get rid of...
So here's what I was trying to figure out, because she was the kind of person who was very open to debate. And I remember listening on the Godless Bitches podcast multiple times, and here on the show, your perspective on abortion, which I think is very, very cogent, but for the life of me, I'm so bad at relating it.
No problem.
Even when I've just talked to my parents about it, it's like, I feel like it's a very complex argument, and I can never wrap my head around explaining it clearly and concisely.
Yeah.
And so I tried doing it and sort of failed. And then also was trying to remember, like, so how did Tracie come to a conclusion about the delineation about when it's acceptable to have an abortion, in the first trimester, or something like that?
Yeah, okay.
Or not. So that's sort of what I'm trying. I would like just a sort of like input from you, I guess, about how you came to that conclusion, and maybe if you can have like a TLDR of your argument, because I feel like I want to share it more often. Yeah,
basically, I mean, there's the law, there's, my dream world, so there's what you want, and then there's what there is, right? And so what there is we have a Roe v. Wade thing, which says that it can seem counterintuitive to some folks, but Roe v. Wade basically says that if you need somebody else's body to survive, you can't have it. If you don't need somebody else's body to survive, you can. It's kind of weird. But I think the point that they're trying to make is they're not saying that you actually have a right to use someone else's body once you are viable. What they're saying is the state now has an interest in the fetus at that point, or the unborn if you prefer. I don't want to use language that people feel is loaded, the unborn, that the state now has an interest in it because it can be autonomous in and of itself, right? So that's the argument the state is making. And with that, they've tried to push back viability, right? So what they're basically saying is that, if like one child in a million can survive at this stage, that means that's when babies are viable, that's when unborns are viable. And I don't buy into that. To me, viable means you're going to be able to survive at least as well, or pretty much as well as a child that's born. If you're going to struggle and I'm not going to say that that's the same as, a child who's born after a full gestation. But so I'm okay, for example, I'm willing to listen to arguments about the concept of abortions with that are just sort of early births or early C-sections, right? So for right now, what we do is we actually have scheduled C-sections or scheduled induced births. I don't know, and that would be cutting off
7-8 months.
Yeah, and that would be, well, I mean, I don't know about 7 months, but I mean, people will schedule it so that it does happen prior to the natural birth, right? So we are aborting the natural process, and we are allowing for an early birth in those cases that is not the natural gestation and birth period, right? We're basically setting up a schedule and saying we're going to do it early, or we're going to do it here if it hasn't happened naturally by then, and that is aborting the process. But we don't consider that abortion because these are women who want their babies, and the babies survive those procedures most of the time. Like that, our goal is that the unborn will survive and be born. But they are still, in my mind, an abortion because you're aborting the process, the natural process, which that's what an abortion is. So when you have this idea that it's viable, if the state wants to be involved and they want to, argue about how this procedure can be done, if somebody doesn't want to carry to term and they want to say, we're going to take that vested interest that Roe v. Wade has given us at 6 months, and you can have the abortion, but we are going to take custody of this unborn once it's born, and it's ours, right? You still have to birth it, and it will be a citizen, but you can end the pregnancy and not basically continue to have your body used without your consent, right? Which is ultimately the reason that we reject things like rape. So in the early stages, what they're basically saying is if you can't survive without another person's body, too bad, so sad is what they're basically describing. And you're the same as somebody who couldn't survive without a kidney donation. They call it personhood. They're calling it personhood. And I shouldn't have said that it's kind of the same as somebody that would donate a kidney or need a kidney, because what they're really saying is that you're not viable and you haven't reached personhood. You have no autonomous existence that can be had at that point, and therefore this is not up to the state. This is not a citizen or could not be a citizen if it were born. It's not viable. I kind of tend to look at it a little bit different when I'm, because I'm coming at this from bodily autonomy, which is not necessarily where Roe v. Wade is going with it. And so I look at it like nobody gets to be forced to have somebody else use their body without their consent for the same reasons we don't allow a rape. And once somebody's born, they're really not your concern anymore as far as you don't get to make decisions to kill them any more than you would be able to make a decision to kill your neighbor, because now this person is a citizen with all the entitlements and protections of the state, right? It's been born, it is a citizen, it's got the Social Security number.
What I'm also trying to understand is that usually, I'm sorry,
No problem.
I remember, with every pregnancy that I carry to term, there are usually a multitude of tests that are performed, on the mom to determine the health of the baby. Now, I know that in some instances there are some health, there are some health concerns or health issues that you cannot determine until once the baby is born. But
or sometimes they're caused by the birth, right? The birth is handled a certain way and the child is somehow damaged and. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And but also, and I know there are some instances where you have premature births, but usually, there are some tests done before the child is. I think there is a test done for Down syndrome that can be determined before the child is born. So I think it depends on there is to me, there would be no justification for a mother deciding to kill her child once it's born due to either birth defect or something, because in some instances or many instances, you can find out about certain medical issues before the child is born.
Right.
You can't just change your mind and decide that, I don't want to have this child anymore, therefore I'm going to end its life once the child is born.
Now, there are also questions about, for example, we have an opt-out parenting system, right?
Yeah.
So you're basically, the child is born, and if you can prove genetic relation like paternity or maternity to the child, then our state says you can claim, you've got paternal rights. The kid is born, you both have the paternal rights and obligations. And then you have to look at whether or not you want to step out. And we have kind of a messed up situation where if one person wants to withdraw, so like if she as the mother says, hey, I don't want anything to do with this, and the father steps up and says, wait, I want to take custody. Or if anybody steps up that wants to take custody, they can sue for custody if she doesn't want custody. But if it's the father in particular, she would then be potentially responsible for helping to support the child.
Right.
And so if one of the parents wants the kid, the other one becomes kind of legally obligated to it, and whether or not people like the system, that's how it works. And so when I'm looking at this, though, what I'm seeing the law saying is sort of like, once you're born, you're a state concern. Our laws that protect human beings protect you as a person when you're born as a person in our society. Before you're viable, you need somebody else's body to survive, and they don't want to lend you their body for your survival. They don't have to. And then there's this in-between period where you have this arguable situation where somebody is potentially autonomous, but they are just sort of in someone else. And the question of how do you handle that legally is where I think people get, the most confused about it. I have no objection to people talking about the concept of separating mother and child and still going forward like that's a birth. I would be open to that. I'm not saying that, for me, it's more a question of the process that people have a problem with at that point, right? Because the abortions at that point still result in a child that would be dead, or with an unborn that comes out and they're dead. And that's what freaks people out. And I'm not necessarily going to sit here and hammer the table and say, yes, this must result in a dead, in a dead human being at the end of this. I'm not that devoted to that to that process, and so that's kind of where I would deviate.
So I feel like I might be missing the last point that you made there. I apologize for that. So when you're saying that in between period, like everything you said before, you said like you definitely have an objection after they're born, which I totally understand. Oh
yeah, because then the state the state has to protect you.
Right. Exactly. So that's like Exactly. So, but I'm more asking, I guess, about like if you found out a month before pregnancy that your child was going to be born with some really debilitating disease that would basically cause them to lead a really painful life for the first maybe even a few months, and then they just would end up probably dying. At the 8-month period, would that be an acceptable sort of point to have an abortion?
So what I'm basically saying is that I would never force somebody to gestate a child when they don't want to. Never. And when it comes to a situation like what you just described, I think that what Roe v. Wade is saying is the state has an interest in that, right? And so the state needs to look at that. And what I'm saying is that I'm saying I would not, the 8-month period, I would not necessarily, I would do everything I could to not force somebody to carry to term. And if the process or the procedure at that point results in the person being, the human being that is in there, the unborn that's in there being dead at the end of the procedure, that's a problem with the procedure that society has to argue about, right, and decide on. But that's not about, to me, her right to not gestate when she doesn't want to, when she's not consenting, is the part that I'm saying I support all the time. Now, what you do, how you do the procedure, and whether it results in something alive or not alive at the end of it, that's a medical sort of question that has to be addressed. And if society wants to argue about how you do it, that's fine. And if somebody objects to the fact that it always results in a death, then they can object to that, and we can look at that process and see if there's humane ways to do it in a way that doesn't result in a death. That's kind of up to the medical community and to the society, according to where we stand on Roe v. Wade, which says that we can make an interest in that because this is something that could be autonomous. And so if this could be an autonomous person, shouldn't they, shouldn't we at least be able to consider them in the equation? And I'm like, I have no objection to that. But I'm not going to consider them to the point that I then force somebody to have their body violated in a way that they don't agree to and they don't consent to. So
that position of not wanting to force someone to maintain that,
right.
Sort of goes up to literally like the day of natural birth for you. Just so I'm trying to fully understand your point.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. I mean, to me, I view that as being the equivalent of a rape. I'm not going to let somebody violate your body. When you decide, it's like if me and you are having sex and 20 minutes in, I say, hey, I'm not down with this and I'm withdrawing my consent. We need to stop this. In my mind, the person needs to stop. There's no question about it. I get to say when somebody uses my body and doesn't use my body, the end. And unless I've broken laws, right? I mean, legally, we can violate people's bodies in certain ways when they break laws and they become incarcerated. They can be searched, or they can, there's things we can do that. So, for example, some states have the death penalty, right? Which is pretty much the ultimate violation of someone's body. And so we can do that if somebody breaks a law, because we reserve as a state the right to restrict your freedoms, restrict your rights, we can put restrictions on a person, not undue ones. We can't torture people or things like that, but we can take steps to ensure social safety, which is, the theory anyway, and we can deal with that. But I don't have a problem, considering somebody that could be surviving autonomously, but I'm not going to violate someone's most basic rights as a human being, if they haven't done anything wrong, they haven't committed a crime.
Yeah. Okay, I think I understand a lot more fully now, and I think it might stem from the fact that your point is that it all comes down to bodily autonomy, and for her, it seems like that wasn't even part of it. It was a whole other I should have the right to decide what happens to my child.
She's operating from a different perspective, and I think she might have a different view of what I would consider parental rights. Right? Some people have I
think that's what it exactly. Yeah. I think that's what it came down to.
She's got some strong views. That's her kid in her head, right? And not it doesn't matter if somebody kills it. Right.
No. That's. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Anyway, I don't want to take up more of your time. I know this is such a weird topic.
It is weird, but okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, all right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and Mandisa too.
Thank you. That was Dan. All right, and I'm gonna. Let's see. I'm hogging the conversation here.
Oh no.
And I do that. I will do that. So I need to. Why not? Let's go on and. Let's see. All right, let's talk. So let's just carry on with it.
Okay, so before you get to the call, I'd like to give a shout out to Khalil Cumberbatch, who did donate to the fundraiser.
Oh, cool.
So thank you very much. Thank you. Your support is appreciated. Again, please keep it coming. And again, we have our full setup here in the studio. Of merchandise. We do have a section on our website about the store. Okay. So you can purchase and order items online. So all right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do. We have a big table full of stuff. I think one time I started calling stuff bling and they were just like, no, it's swag.
Yes.
It's swag. And that's not even tonight. That was another time. But yeah, so I have learned it was swag. And maybe that makes me just a little bit better person for learning swag versus bling. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll do the other abortion call. Why not? So let's go to Cole in Canada. And you were on with Tracie and Mandisa. Thanks for your call.
Hi, thanks for answering my call. That's awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, I believe you guys are pro-choice. Is that correct? Or
I would say I would say that's probably right. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Choice. Okay, now I'm kind of curious. So why? Because I know you guys brought up the "my body, my choice." Was that the argument? The first thing you guys brought up?
Yeah, I feel like it's a basic human right that nobody gets to use your body without your consent.
Okay, so I have a question for that. What about in the case of where the born baby needs to breastfeed? Would you guys?
Yeah, that's not a bodily violation. So first of all, there's a couple things. Number one is if I birth the child and keep it, I have agreed to what is a social legal contract for parenthood. That makes me a caregiver, just like a caregiver for somebody, for example, that is maybe disabled in a way that needs assistance, right, that I would assist with. So it's not really about paternity or maternity. It's not about parenthood so much as just that caregiver status that you end up with when you consent to parenthood. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Okay, so you're already consenting to it pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, by the time you birth the
give
child,
birth,
even after you birth it, theoretically, like I said, there are some problems. In the last call, we talked about how there are some problems with opting out of parenthood, right? So, for example, we do not have a system where one parent can opt out. So in our situation, and I understand there are all kinds of problems with that, right? So there are situations where maybe one parent did opt out and didn't inform the other parent. So there's things that go wrong even with that. But the legal theory is that if one parent wants the baby, the other parent doesn't, we don't let them opt out as a single unit. Like they either both are getting the baby or they're not. And I'm not sure that I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm just saying that's how it's kind of set up. But by the time, if she gets pregnant and she goes through the gestation and she consents to give the birth and then she consents to keep the baby, then she is considered to have agreed to paternal obligations.
Okay. So I have another question. So
parent.
When does human life begin?
I would say life begins the moment you have your own DNA. Like literally at conception.
So conception.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's when human life begins.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I mean, it's a human being. It has its own DNA. Yeah.
Okay, we can agree with that. So I would, because I'm pro-life, so I'm going to put forward this, I guess, premise and conclusion. So I believe all human, no matter where they live or gender, whatever, all humans, no matter what, should have the equal right to life. Is there a problem? I don't really. First of all, I'm going to say I don't fully grasp the concept of a quote right to life. It's mentioned in the Declaration of Independence, I think. That we've got a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but we don't really have a concept that I'm aware of a right to life in our law, right? Like Constitution and then down the stream, we don't really have that as a concept. So I'm not sure that I understand what you mean when you say everyone has an equal right to life. Like, how are you defining a right to life? Well, every human being should have, I believe every human being should have the equal right to life.
What is a right to life? Right, what is a right to life?
Yeah, so no one should be able to harm another human being.
I don't agree with that.
Right?
I don't agree with that.
Like an innocent human being, what I mean. So no one should be able to harm an innocent human being for... Yeah,
I think we're going to have a difference of opinion on what constitutes innocent, but let's go ahead.
What would you say what innocent is?
That you're not infringing on someone else in a way that violates their basic rights.
Okay.
So if I'm violating your body and you have not consented, I would say I'm not innocent.
Okay. Let's go with this then. So how about this? When you have intercourse, you're already committing to having a child.
No, you're not.
That's not correct.
No, you're not. No, you're not. That's like saying that when you drive a car, you're committing to have a car accident.
No,
you're not.
Okay.
You run the risk of perhaps conceiving, but that is not true.
Right, because here's the thing. Sex is sex, right? And conception is conception. Those are two different things. Do you agree that a person can try to conceive and not successfully conceive?
That is true, yes.
So people can have sex and be unable to conceive. There are people who try to not conceive that conceive,
and
correct?
Conceive, yes.
Right. And there are people who conceive without sex, correct? Right? There are people who go and get pregnant at a clinic.
Yeah.
Okay, so sex and conception are two separate events.
Okay.
Right?
I see that. But how about this one though? So isn't pregnancy or isn't intercourse naturally ordered towards human life? Isn't that naturally
I don't know what you mean by that. I don't know what you mean by that.
Because when you have intercourse and the sperm and egg meet, it's just going to be human being right there.
No, right? We don't. What I'm saying is that doesn't always occur, right?
It doesn't always occur. But
it doesn't even often occur. It doesn't happen even often, right? So human beings.
I'm just saying that the fact that it even does.
Yes, it can happen, just like a car accident can happen.
Yeah.
All right. But I don't think that it's a natural order of driving to have a car accident, just because we know that a certain percentage of people are going to have an accident. What I'm saying is that if you want to look at why people have sex, there's a few things to consider. Number one, we are not very fertile. right? Human beings as a species are not fertile. So you look at something like a salmon, it has sex like once, and it has like a bajillion offspring. That's a really successful reproducer. That's an animal that you look at and you say, you know what? That there is an example of sex for reproduction, right? But you have other animals, and it starts to get less. So some animals, they go into heat, right? So you'll have an animal that, for example, the female will have a certain period where she presents as fertile, and she lets this be known, not necessarily consciously, but her body will put out scent, will, go into heat, start to bleed. Like, she will do things. Sometimes the vulva will expand, and so this is a way to signal, hey, I am fertile. Right? And then that will attract mates, and they will have sex, and it has a higher rate of reproduction because those animals are also kind of geared toward, we have sex when we're ready to reproduce, and then we have sex. Human beings don't do this, right? So human females, if it weren't for modern science, we really don't know human females would not know just sort of consciously that, hey, I am now, ovulating, and it's time for, so we don't know that. And we also have no way of signaling men that, hey, it's time for me to reproduce, so I'm really looking for sex. So the question becomes, why do people have sex, right? So why are we having sex if we're getting further and further from this idea of it being coupled to reproduction? So here's some interesting stats, right? When gorillas engage in sex, they tend to conceive every 12 sex acts. That's a real good rate. Human beings, when they studied some human beings who were trying to have a baby, these are people that were invested in having a baby, 104 sex acts per conception when they were trying. That's a lot of sex to have a baby, right? Yeah. So for people, we're more of a social sexual animal. And there are other species that are like this, right? So there's bonobos, and they are rampant with sex, right? They are like a type of animal that looks like a chimpanzee, and they are having lots and lots of sex, and they seem to have sex as a stress release thing. People have sort of bonding as well, right? So human beings bond a lot. We have sex a lot. Our models of sexuality, I'm not convinced in the West, are necessarily aligned to what people would do if they weren't so socialized to particular models, right? So for example, you have estimates that can show anywhere of upwards of like 70% of men who say, I would have sex with somebody else if I thought that it wouldn't cause a problem outside my marriage, right? And women at similar rates, like up in the 60s, I would have sex with other people. People are sort of geared towards sexuality, but we're not necessarily geared toward that being for procreation. Now, I do agree with you that, yes, we do reproduce sexually. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that's the wildest idea I've ever heard. It's like, no, clearly we are a species that reproduces sexually. But it's not really the primary, it doesn't seem to be if it is the primary goal of our sexuality, we're not very good at it.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you know what is the primary goal of it?
It seems to be social. Right? We seem to be sexual social animals that we bond and sort of, it's part of our bonding.
Physical,
and
I would disagree with that though. Why? Because we can only have intercourse with we don't have intercourse with family, right? We don't have intercourse with our children, things like that. We only have intercourse with people we want to reproduce with.
Right, but you don't really need bonds, I guess, within your family, right? So you have, and that's what somebody just shouted out, gay people, right? Because so sexuality is more about pleasure. It's more about sharing an experience with somebody for most of us. I mean, most of us, for example, are selective. Right? You're right that we don't do that with family, but family you kind of have a bond with. The whole point...
But that's why I'm saying it can't... So, go ahead. Okay.
The point of social species is that it's very important to make bonds with people outside your family. If you didn't, and you did start inbreeding with your family, that would start making chromosomal problems.
Correct.
And the other issue is... that we...
Can I just cut in for a second?
We have to make a bigger society. Right? Which requires that we reach out in other ways to other family groups.
Okay. Well, the thing is, though, I would say because we can't interbreed, because we can't, because of that, I would say that's why it makes it more, that's why it's more naturally oriented towards children because, those things that you said before, that we don't mate with, our family and stuff like that. So that's why I would say it's not very ordered towards.
Right, but what I'm saying is that it would be used to form bonds in situations where we would not be already bonded, right? So you're already bonded with your family because it takes a long time to raise a child to a status where it can be more independent, right? Human children require a long-term care. And so you're going to already have like this immediate family tie. So people, though, as societies, we reach out to larger groups than our immediate family, right? When you even small groups, even small communal like Amazon groups, indigenous natives in the Amazon, even though they're small groups, they're still mixed up. They're not like just immediate family. And so this is a way to make bonds outside of your immediate family.
Yeah, but I would say because you can't, like what I said before, you just can't build these relationships with your family. I think that just right there makes it not a primary focus, because you can't simply mate with your children. Like that's just why it can't be a
right. But you don't need mating to bond with your kids, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
But I do need it to bond with somebody I don't know, right? So somebody outside my family, if I'm going to bond with them, sex is one good way to do it.
Okay.
But and we need to extend beyond our families, and this is a tool that makes it a little easier to do so.
So the primary goal is to build relationships with people other than your family. That's the.
I would say that it's a social thing. Yeah, it's about creating social connections.
And it can produce, new families and children, but it doesn't have to.
But it's not ordered towards that, you're saying. So you're saying it's designed, or the primary purpose is to build relationships with people other than your family.
Yeah, and I mean, for example, if somebody's not fertile, we don't say, oh, there's no point having sex with them, right? And people who are gay are just like, they have sex with each other, right? And, there's all kinds of combinations.
Okay. I understand that.
But people do have children as a result of sex. That's not false. So where do we go with that?
I don't know. That's just like, it's hard. I'm not sure what to say anymore now. Like, I understand your view, and that makes sense, like to some degree, but that's.
You know what? Here's a thought. How about this, Cole? I mean, obviously we had a pretty good discussion, right?
Yeah, I think
you threw down some thoughts. We threw down some thoughts, and you're like, this is some new information, and I am totally good with people saying, you know what? I got stuff to think about here. If you want to just kind of say, let me take 5 here, and I'm going to go away and think about this some more, and maybe do some research, right? Look at like social, sexual social animals like bonobos and human sexuality and bonobo sexuality, and see what some people have to say about those similarities, and what the arguments are for, human sexuality being so unfertile. And some of the evolutionary explanations for that, and just see what you think. Just give it some read. And I really appreciate your call. I want to thank you for it. I feel like it was productive. It was honest, and
that's awesome.
That was great.
That was good. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole. Yeah, you too. All right, we're batting okay. I was thinking this was going to be a stressful,
It's been quite
afternoon.
interesting, though.
But yeah, I mean, these are good conversations. I appreciate these people, and so. Let's see, we do have, we have one more theist, and then we'll hit the atheists. And so let me go here, and we'll go with Michael in San Antonio, Texas. You're on with Tracie and Mandisa, and I just want to say, they did say that your question's about random mutations and evolution. We will see if we can have a conversation about it. We are not biologists, and we don't claim to be, and it might be somewhere over my head, but I'm willing to hear the question and see if I have any thoughts.
We might be on equal ground. I'm not a biologist in any way. Barely passed it in high school. So thanks for taking my call. And yeah, I don't want to get like overly scientific, every now and then I just kind of, get different questions in my head, and sometimes I struggle to answer them, and I'll put them on Reddit as well too, but sometimes that can just get ugly and doesn't really go anywhere constructive.
I understand.
And so I think this is my third time calling the show now, so I do enjoy calling up. But yeah, basically, my question is that let's see here. So when you look at evolution in general, we see that evolution leads to a biological living entity, growing, like basically
changing, adapting,
organisms,
right?
and they grow and they become more complex, essentially.
Well, they adapt,
develop,
right?
The eyes. Well, like the eyes.
Well, I mean, jellyfish haven't really gotten too far.
Well, it all depends on how you look at it.
Exactly.
For sure. But so yeah, that gets. So let me back up here. Sorry.
That's okay.
Easy to get sidetracked.
No, it's totally fine.
Stuff, so when you look at the organism and you see how the different organs have developed and grown over millions of years, to become, the entire system, the mammalian system is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
When you study biology, and it's phenomenal, especially in the sense that it's self-sustainable, that, it can produce, it can reproduce, and it, in modern terms, it doesn't leave a carbon footprint. It doesn't produce waste that isn't naturally taken care of. Most of the life on the planet.
So we got a real efficient system going on, right? Well, I mean, yeah,
exactly.
like the planet seems to go like it goes, right?
Yes. And
okay.
So for over millions of years, for this to grow and to continue to go in that direction, as evolutionary theorists say, through random mutations, why did the mutations keep growing and keep benefiting? Why didn't they just mutate some other random direction? Why over millions of years?
Here's a question. Do you think that a mutation that's not beneficial would probably have a good chance of making it to go forward?
In general, at best, it wouldn't have an effect. But anything below that, it might make it more difficult for the living entity to survive.
Right. But do you think that something that's actually, quote, beneficial might be something that reproduces more?
Yes.
I agree. Does that help?
Okay. Well, my question is the scope of the entire system. To me, that seems like it couldn't have happened just by random chance. And the fact
I don't think it does happen by random chance. You said you called a couple times before, and you sound like somebody who is genuinely interested in this. And I'm going to recommend a series. It's like several episodes, and it's called Waking Up in the Universe. Growing Up in the Universe, and if you Google it, you'll find it. It's a super dated, like super old series, and that alone might make it funny for you, like make it entertaining. It was just a small lecture series that Dawkins gave like a long time ago, before all this atheist stuff was like in his pocket. And it was when he was just doing biology, and it has to do with explaining how these things progress in a way that I felt was like super clear. Right? So he uses like these lock examples where it's like a combination lock and you get one number, and once you have that one number going, you get random until you hit another number. Sure. And then you get random, and by the end of it, it's like, how did we get so complicated that we open this lock, right? And it's like, well, it happened from these little increments. And it kind of, this is a really good example that I just thought of that you might look up that's kind of funny. And it's these squirrel obstacle courses, right?
Sure.
So I saw this video and I was just amazed. And it was these people that have built these really wild obstacle courses in their yards, like these huge, massive things of tricks and puzzles. And these squirrels hit these things, rip right through them, get the food, and they're done. And I'm like, how? How does a squirrel do that? Like, how did you train this squirrel to do this? This isn't wild that this squirrel can do this crazy, complicated obstacle course in just seconds, right? That is unbelievable. And I couldn't understand how a squirrel could do such a thing. And then I started looking at how they build these, right? So here's how you build one.
They do it one by one at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know about it.
And Dawkins' point is that that's how evolution works too, right?
Well, that's what I'm having trouble with is that while you're going to the next lock and the next lock, in Dawkins' example, the ones before it are staying where they're at. But these random mutations should be changing these things. So that, over the course of millions of years. So, like,
some things are well adapted, right? Some things are, like a shark or a bat, I think, is, some of these things are well adapted. Sure. Or cockroach doesn't really, cockroaches are super.
They are the longest living species on the
planet. They hit a really good system early on, and they're sticking with it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. But, we're saying all these things, but at the end of the tunnel, you're saying that there was nothing that had any hand in this entire system, this cockroach that somehow just had this incredible system that allowed it to survive over millions of years, and that other systems over millions of years have grown and grown to survive. You can't kill life, actually. We try. There's $1 billion industry trying to kill life, and it can't be done.
I don't know what that means. Right?
Yeah, what is that?
You're going to have to help me out on that one.
Ant killer. There's all kinds
I can kill ants, let me tell you. It's not pretty how I do it. It may not be legal. But
you can't get rid of them.
So you're saying things can't get extinct? Nothing goes extinct?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that life is so voracious that it continues to grow and it continues to flourish. And to me, if there wasn't something that had,
I don't know, but I think you're looking at you're looking at a very limited thing, though. Some life goes forward, and some life hurts bad, dwindles, and dies. Not all life goes forward. But you're just saying that as long as things are alive, that means life is flourishing. But we don't know that, right? We could be in the process of destroying everything on this planet right now.
Well, humans are another story, aren't we?
Well, but we're life, aren't we?
Sure.
I don't think it's impossible that we could take everything down on this planet. I don't think that's an impossibility, right? I think
everything out?
Yeah, I think we could take ourselves and everything else on this planet out.
Well,
I'm not saying that I know this. I'm just saying I don't see any reason why that's an impossibility.
Well, because we can't even kill the ants in our front yard. They keep coming back.
We're not putting everything we've got into it. Again, I don't want to give my secrets up, but it's like, some things are not legal.
Okay.
There are ways to kill fire ants, and I'm not, it's like, may not be the nicest things in the world.
Kind of digressed a little bit. But no, I just feel that, when looking at these systems of biology and evolution and how they've gone in this one direction, when the evolutionaries are telling us that it's natural selection and
But they haven't gone in one direction. I guess that's what I keep getting lost in, because some things are changing, some things are staying real stagnant, some things are dying off. Everything's going in lots of different directions.
Well, I'm talking about the process of evolution over billions of years that's led to the human form that we see before.
But you said humans were a different story.
Well, that is true. Exactly.
Okay, so then we're just like one species.
Not in a biological sense. I'm talking about in like what we do. But in a biological sense, we're mammals.
Sure.
Okay.
That's fine. We're mammals, and sometimes mammals go extinct, right? Like we just lost out a rhino species that's gone now, I think, recently. And that's a mammal.
Right. But no, okay, so the point when I'm why I'm talking about the evolution of up to the human, and you're saying, is it going forward, is it not? I mean, the question is simply in numbers, the organisms that have developed, and humans in general, and Richard Dawkins certainly echoed this. It was the first line in one of his books, that we are the greatest thing in the universe, like the most intelligent, the greatest thing the universe has created is like the human and the human ability to think and to create and to rationalize that we know of. There could be other things we don't know of, right?
Right. So yeah, we definitely have, like, when it comes to cognitive capacity, as far as we're able to measure ourselves against other species, we tend to measure up pretty well. But there's other capacities where we're not as good.
Oh, well, a lot.
Yeah. So some things we're good at, some things we're not so good at. We're bad at breathing underwater. Really bad.
That's true. But no, I mean, in general, people, I know, Richard Dawkins, they tend to think humans as like the highest that evolution has produced.
I don't think you can think of it as like highest, right? You can look at things and say that something is kind of better at this than something else. And yes, I think that there's definitely obviously, okay, let me just make it clear. Obviously, there are things unique about human beings, and if there weren't, we wouldn't be able to tell humans from other animals, right? There's unique things about a golden retriever, which is how we can tell a golden retriever from other animals. There's things that make it a golden retriever, things that it is that other things are not. And so, yes, human beings have the things that make us human that are different than the other things that are not human. I agree. And some of those things are unique or uniquely extreme, let's say. Is that fair?
Yeah, I suppose that's fair enough. But I don't know. I mean, I strongly believe that, that entire system that we're looking at that has, produced through evolution, things like, blood, how blood clots, the nervous system and skin and the regenerative system of our bodies.
What else would it do? Like, what else would it do?
What else would what do?
What else would blood do?
I mean, it fills books with how much it does.
No. I'm sorry. I'm not being clear. You're saying you're amazed that it clots, and I'm saying it's not all blood clots, right? But most blood clots. And I guess what I'm asking is, what if blood didn't clot? We'd be talking about something else, right? Or if blood clotted in a different way, we'd be talking about that. So, I mean, you're looking at what is and just saying this is what is and this is amazing. And I'm saying, but what else would it be?
I don't understand.
What else would it be, right? So, for example, do you know the little story about the puddle that, goes into the hole? Like there's a puddle and it's conscious and it rains and it fills a hole and it's like a puddle in a hole. And it says, wow, this is so amazing that this hole fits me so perfectly. Every crevice matches my shape as a puddle, right? And I'm kind of looking at it going, what else would it be but the hole? Wouldn't it be whatever developed in the hole? If you have something that fills the hole, it's going to be what fits in the hole. And if you're like a thing that grew up in this universe or on this planet, you're going to be whatever grows up on this planet. And so you're saying, hey, it's amazing to me the blood clots. And I'm like, why wouldn't it?
Well, I believe that's just taking the entire system for granted. Like, oh, it's here. It's always been here.
No. I'm definitely not saying it's always been here. I'm saying, what else would it be? What makes you think it should be other or that it could be other? Could it be something other than it is? Could it be something other than it is?
I mean, that's just theoretical musings. I mean, I'm looking at what it is.
I'm saying it is. It has become what it has become, and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, look what it's become." And I'm saying, if it became something else, you'd be looking at that, saying, "Oh my gosh, look."
It could be a pile of dirt on the ground.
If I take a jar of dice, and I throw it on the table, what are the odds that it's going to land the way it lands? Like if I have 10 dice and throw them out on this table and they land in a certain sequence, right, of numbers up, that's going to be some pretty crazy odds that I would get that result. But I can take those same dice, put them in the jar, roll them again, get an entirely different result, and it's the same odds, those same wild odds, those same outrageous odds. I can do this endlessly. And I'm going to get things that it's like, what are the odds that I got that?
All you're ever going to get is numbers on a die. But in this system...
But the odds of those numbers, put 1,000 dice in those things and throw it. And now you've got astronomical odds that it would end up that way. You're saying it's astronomical that it ended up this way, and I'm saying however it ended up would be astronomical.
I'm not even saying it's astronomical. It's beyond astronomical, you know?
Yeah, and what I'm saying is it is what it is, right? You're basically saying because it's not something else, then what it is amazing. And I'm saying
it's how it is, and what I said, matter could just be a rock on the ground.
Yes, it could.
And it is what it is.
It could.
But somehow it became this human system of
it did.
The mammals, the fish, everything that, recently they discovered some animals that live in a cave. And in that cave, the atmosphere is sulfuric. There's more sulfur than anything else. And those animals adapted.
Yeah, they're called extremophiles.
Environment.
Yeah, and what else would live in sulfur except an extremophile? I couldn't. And if I could, I'd be an extremophile, right? I mean,
what else?
Or if most things lived in sulfur, then the things that lived in our atmosphere would be like, an extremophile.
But the fact that it adapted to something that extreme.
What else would it adapt to? I mean, you're looking at the result.
It at one time wasn't oxygen.
I'm going to say, go and Google waking up in the universe and just give it a try, right? Just go through it and see if it helps you grasp that you are making the end result this amazing thing without understanding. Well, it seems you understand the steps to get there, but for some reason you're not calculating them.
I can understand the
steps. Yes, you can.
But to me, all of those steps show something that is, responsible for it.
Why?
You know what I'm saying?
What else would it? What if people had, were a different height? Would that make it not a god? I mean, what? What is it that would?
Well, no.
What result would be, not indicative of something making it, designing it?
Well, that's an impossible thing to answer because we live in the world around us that we're all looking. I mean,
we only have one sample size. We got a sample set of one. And we can't really understand what else it would be or if it could be anything else. I don't know if it could be different than it is.
Right.
And, I mean, so maybe this is what universes and planets that have life do.
Yeah.
But watch it. Give it a watch. I found it interesting. I'm not saying. Well, I'm not saying like go and learn yourself something here. I watched the Waking Up in the Universe. I found it really interesting and helpful, and I'm just sort of throwing it out there. I would recommend, based on what you're asking, that you take a look at it because I think that was pretty much what he's working to explain. It might take a few episodes of it before it gets into that, but bear with it. It's only a few episodes long. It's like maybe I think 4 or 5 episodes long, and they're kind of fun. He does these little experiments, and I don't want to make it. I'm not being patronizing, but like there's children in the audience, and so he kind of gears it toward a fun sort of sometimes it's interactive. There's like an interactive thing, and he does little like experiments and stuff that are very visual, and it was just an interesting thing. I think you'll like it even if at the end of it you're like, no, I still think it's amazing and I still think it's designed. I think you would still enjoy watching it. I'm just going to say. That's my recommendation.
Sure. I appreciate that. And, to be honest, a lot of the questions that kind of come in my head and that I'm not really getting answers to are like from reading Dawkins. People have recommended me, check out this, read this book. And I read him and I'm just like, he's not answering. He's not going deep enough for me. He's looking at the surface and he's like the locks, but, I feel like there's got to be something like deeper because there's a lot of questions that just observing it can't tell you, like the why. Why did it happen?
Oh, but you're assuming there's a why. What if there is no why?
Well, the why is survival. Have you ever watched the Nature Channel? Those animals really want to survive, and they're trying. Right.
But you're talking about individuals now, and before you were talking about like the whole aspect of creating life and gearing life toward what we have as
individuals. Even the little cell.
Right, but I didn't say that an individual can't have a why. You're saying that all of existence has a why, not the individuals. I'm saying that I agree that individuals can have will. I'm arguing that I don't think that there is a demonstration of a will outside of individual minds.
Okay, well, I mean, I would argue for both, but I appreciate you making that a difference.
Well, I can demonstrate only one. So,
that's true.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to let you go. We got a couple more callers, but thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Woo. Okay, so now I guess we're getting into after show. Is that all right?
That'll be fine.
Okay.
Yes.
We got a couple more calls, and I'm thinking these will be okay. The other ones were more going to be potentially contentious, even though they weren't all. But these are we've left the atheists till last. We always prefer the theist callers and try to get those in first. And so now these two hopefully will just be more conversational, and we'll go with let's try Ryan in Arizona. Ryan in Arizona, you're on with Tracie and Mandisa, and you have a Senate bill that you want to talk about public schools. Is that correct?
Yes. Hello, Tracie.
Hey.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
First off, Tracie, I would like to thank you and all the hosts of AXT for the wonderful work you guys do. The Atheist Experience played a significant role in my deconversion from Christianity. Please keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you for that statement. So we're looking at Senate Bill 373 in Indiana.
Yeah. The reason I called is that I would like to spread awareness of Indiana State Senate Bill 373. According to what I've read about it online, it's a bill introduced by Indiana State Senator Dennis Cruz, which would require public schools to put up which would require three things. It would require public schools to put up a durable poster or framed picture that says, "In God We Trust." It would require that any district offering elective courses that survey the religions of the world, say a comparative religions course, must include the study of the Bible. And most disturbingly, it allows the governing body of a school corporation to require the teaching of various theories concerning the origin of life, including creation science. Have either of you heard about this?
I have not.
No.
Yeah.
Can I give just a quick thoughts?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in God We Trust, you're going to have a trouble getting anywhere with that because it has been tried in courts before, and they consider it to be a deistic sort of motto that is not like a Christian-specific thing, and so that usually is allowed to stand. And I'm not sure that I agree with it because I think they go into court and they argue that it's not Christian, and then they come out of court and they say, we're a Christian nation because it says in God we trust, right? So they're duplicitous. They're not honest about what, really happens in the public with regard to this motto, and yet the motto wins all the time in court. So in God we trust, as grating as that may be, would probably not survive. I mean, it would probably survive a challenge because it's been challenged and it stands. So that's kind of they're probably going to get that one. The comparative religion course that has to include the Bible, I think it's fair in the United States to include biblical religions in a comparative religion course because that has had like a huge influence on our society, right? And I would say not for the better. But I don't have really a problem with a comparative religion course, and I'm actually excited that they want to include other religions, right? Like, I'm sort of like, wow, it's not just the Bible. Like, I think some people are concerned that in their schools they're looking at like some kind of biblical studies that it gets squeezed in because of its literary significance in references. And so for this, I would probably be okay, but I would have some concerns, right? Because you don't want to open it up to a particular teacher putting in religious opinions. So that would have to be very carefully monitored. But I think comparative religion actually can do more good to open people's minds to the differences and the diversity in culture and religion. So, having studied like anthropology of religion, for example, I think it's a good thing to kind of understand that, wow, there's different religions out there than the one I see all the time. And if they do that, I'd be okay, even if they're including the Bible, which I think does have significance within our culture. The part about creationism, I think, is just completely off the wall. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't back that.
I'm reading, the sponsor of the bill, which is, of course, a Republican. Sorry, didn't mean to say of course, but it says that the representative has a long history of sponsoring anti-evolution legislation. So it would be trying to teach more creation science rather than comparative literature or comparative religion. It would be more to push religion as a fact as opposed to...
That's a problem.
That's very much a problem.
Yeah, it was ruled unconstitutional.
Well, good.
Yeah, but the teaching of creation science in public schools was ruled unconstitutional by a federal court in McLean versus Arkansas in 1982, and by the Supreme Court in Edwards versus Aguilard in 1987. That's why I find this so alarming.
Right, and from what I'm reading here, that his previous bills that he introduced died in the state legislation. So the best thing would be to make sure that it dies again.
And what's interesting, though, is that the Senate has packed the courts, right? So I don't know what kind of court appointments have been made in your state or in this state. I guess this is not your state, but in Indiana, I don't know what court appointments may have been made or if they're dealing with the same court. But now that they have a SCOTUS that is conservative friendly, right? You're saying, hey, this has already been tried and this has already fallen. And so, why are they doing that? A lot of times what they do is they challenge the same stuff again when they have a differently leaning court, right? Because they're hoping that when this gets to SCOTUS this time, they're going to see it our way. And then it's going to stand. And that was sort of the fear that went on with the court starting to weight in a certain direction that may favor religious privilege or religious oppression in schools and things like this, that they repackage as religious freedom, when it's really just like we can capture your children in a public school and then start indoctrinating them.
Right.
I watched I wanted to spread awareness to the atheist community about this.
Sure.
Hopefully we'll be able to fight it.
Yeah. So again, they're saying that's Indiana Senate Bill 373, something to watch. I want to thank Ryan for calling it to our attention. And definitely you're going to see lawsuits like this. And they are going to start, the states are going to start bringing things like this again. And it's a little bit makes me nervous that it's a Senate bill and that the Senate is the one that confirmed all the judges. So they probably know which states to target for which legislation to get this stuff through to SCOTUS and get favorable opinions. When you start to see these cases and you think to yourself, oh, this got shot down already, it's just it's a different court now.
Yeah. All right. I know you guys give preferential treatment to CS callers, so I'd like to thank you again for taking my call.
Hey, thank you for your patience. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting.
Yeah, it was a long wait.
It was the whole show.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, have a good one.
Thank you, Ryan. And someone else waited through the whole show. And do you want to plug the fundraiser again before we hit the last call?
Please do. If you would like to support our organization, please do support Black Nonbelievers. You may go to our website at blacknonbelievers.org. There should also be a link to our PayPal. You can email at donations@blacknonbelievers.org. Your support does help us continue with our events and the outreach that we provide, and also the events that we put on. So, and many of our chapters are doing some wonderful work, and not just building that community, but some of our chapter leaders also volunteer with other organizations like Atheists Helping the Homeless. So we do collaborate and we do contribute towards other service initiatives. So thank you very much.
All right. So now let's go to Jacob in Portland. And Jacob, you waited longer than any other caller, and I just thank you for your patience. You're on with Tracie and Mandisa, and it says here that your question is, you have a comment about religion providing major benefits to society in two ways that you feel it's going to be hard to get rid of religion until we fill the gaps.
Right. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. So I think the two major societally important things that religion offers currently that I can think of are emotional comfort to individuals and a sense of community.
Okay.
And those are because people tend to be kind of tribal by nature. So,
sure.
Being able to be part of the same club, whether it be different aspects of nerd culture or sports or having different teams you're fans of, whatever.
Sure.
And I don't know how we're going to, because it's usually very community-based, because geographically, and that can be really valuable. And I think that's good. I think it's a really nice benefit that it offers. I just wish it didn't come with all the extra misinformation and shaping minds to not form reasonable thoughts.
I think that your call is like particularly suited to Mandisa here, because you're saying that, hey, how do communities offer more community and more emotional support in order to, allow people to leave a religious context? And I think what Mandisa was talking about when she first, came on and gave her introduction was, we're a small community and we're a very religious community. And so I would think that those two issues and that kind of support and community is like very, very much an issue for the people that Mandisa works with.
That, and I would offer some counter to that, because particularly within the religious community, is that yes, there is a sense of community and support, but it often comes at that emotional price that if you don't submit to these ideas, then somehow there is something wrong with you. So yes, the underlying the underlying tenets of these communities and these institutions aren't ultimately beneficial, or I would argue that they aren't. And also this idea of conformity, that you need to belong to this, you need to belong to this community, or else you may be ostracized, or else you may not get anywhere. So some people might think that that's and I'm not saying that it's every church or every every religious institution. There is certainly power and strength in numbers as well. And we can't forget that, religion, the church has had a huge head start. And also the way they've been able to do that was to instill this sense of power and fear. And so we are combating that, yes. And also the notion that religion is the only institution that can offer fellowship, that it has a monopoly on fellowship. And it really doesn't. And it takes a matter of people being able to rethink that notion, that you can build community out of anything.
There you go.
And really, it just takes, we're not saying that everyone should leave the church, that everyone should, because if people are comfortable in that, then, and if that's what they feel, helps get them through their lives, then that's totally fine. But for those who are, and it may be beneficial, like I said, it may be beneficial to some individuals, but for those who aren't, who don't believe in that anymore, sure, there are some things that the secular atheist community, there are some models that we can take from churches in how they organize, without all of the dogma and without, all of the premises. There are certainly a lot of things that, that we can learn from. Does it mean that the church is the absolute foundation on that? No, because when you're dealing with people, then that's what's going to happen. And yes, this idea of being tribal or having a safe space or gravitating towards familiarity, that is something that, yes, that we are always, contending with. And I don't see that necessarily as a bad thing unless you are gravitating towards something that will ultimately infringe upon the rights of others. and we've certainly seen that happen. But yes, are there certain things that we can take as far as building that support for a better community? Yes, but there are so many people who have been burnt by the church and their religious experiences that they are still recovering from them, hence recovering from religion as an organization. True. And so people need to understand that anything that takes collective efforts will need for people to support it. And I think that there are many people who just aren't finding that in churches anymore, that they have found that many churches do, tend to be emotionally manipulative. And there's nothing wrong with cultivating or providing emotional support, but when it does have a foundation of manipulation, or that you are just bringing people in under the guise of being friendly, but then ultimately that changes. Or you have to give up your sense of agency. That is problematic, even if initially it seems like it's doing some good. So that's always that we always have to examine that part. And I would argue that, ultimately it's not that good in the long run, and it hasn't been.
I think what you just said what Mandisa is saying reminds me of something, because I gave a talk on religion and family values. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I found when I was doing my research is that families that, or religions that are not authoritarian, that do not hijack the family in service of the church, tend to be a little bit healthier.
Yeah.
So what happens is, it's no different than having your kid join the soccer team and the whole family goes out to the soccer game.
Right.
And you engage in that, and it's like it's not like the family exists to serve the soccer team.
Correct.
Right? And so soccer becomes this thing that everybody can do together, and you pack a lunch. Yeah.
Yes.
You go down there, cheer for Sally, and everybody's happy, and then you come home and you won or you lost, and you go get ice cream, and it's just like an outing, and it's fun. And some churches work that way, right? Where they support the family, and the families can have different views or different ideas, and they can still go there. And if one of the kids doesn't believe, it's not a big deal, and you're going to go work in the soup kitchen whether you believe it or you don't believe it. The family's going down, and we're going to help tonight. And it's just sort of a thing that the family does, and nobody's going to get kicked out of the family because they don't support the church. And on the other end of that spectrum is what Mandisa is also describing, and that was one of the things that I found, was the people who are like, if you're not on board with the church, you're out of the family. And so it's literally this situation where the church has hijacked the family and said the role of the family is to support the church. And if you're not on board with that, you're outside. But there's other church examples where the church becomes like a thing that says, hey, we're here to support families, mm-hmm. and that's what they're doing. And when those churches happen, they're just not rigid and authoritarian. And they're just sort of there doing activities and stuff, and they might have a lesson on civics, being a good person or something. Jesus tells you to love everyone, and that's sort of the extent of it.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, I understand what you're saying, is that, it certainly does offer people something, or they wouldn't keep going. And like Mandisa is bringing up, sometimes it comes at a huge cost, and sometimes, depending on the church, it might come at a low cost and be a big benefit. It just depends on how they're running it. But yes, those are things that people need, and if they can't get it outside of a church, that's going to be tough, because basically they're going to have to make decisions about whether or not to stay in churches that might be toxic.
And I would say that, yes, even calling out our own community, we do pride ourselves on our intellectual capability and our logical thinking and critical thinking, which sometimes can seem very cold, which can be very off-putting, especially depending on who we're talking to. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to take everything personal, but showing empathy is going to be a huge part of how we continue to build that community, and understanding the different perspectives that people are coming from. It will make a huge difference as to when people leave religion and they leave the church, how we are able to handle that.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Jacob? You started to say something, I cut you off.
I didn't want to cut you guys off. I think my point was that religion is, in my own personal experience, which is limited, always been a negative thing.
Okay.
I was never a believer. One thing my parents did actually well was let me figure it out for myself. But the few times that I have been to any religious churches, they've always been negative experiences. So my personal opinion and view on things is that I would like religion to just be left behind. I don't want to force people out of it. I just want to give them a better option.
Sure.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
There's a certain irony to Left Behind, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a whole pamphlet series it's called Left Behind, and it's just funny that you're like, I would like religion to be left behind.
Yeah, well, I think it's outdated. I think that, at least in our particular country, I think that some of the positive religious groups that you described sound more like they reflected the ideals of secular humanism more than not.
Yeah, and they do. I think those churches are very, very non-worried about whether or not the Bible aligns with everything they're saying or doing. And, they're more into just community aspects like you're describing.
Right.
Yeah. I think one of the issues that I've had is that haven't. I guess my main problem is I haven't looked very carefully, but I'm not passively aware of organizations in the secular humanist vein that draw in any similar capacity. But I guess they might also not solicit to the same degree either.
Well, I don't think you're going to find something that, if you're saying draw to this similar capacity that religious churches or, that churches are packing them in, I think you're not going to find that.
Yeah, and I mean, you have organizations like the Sunday Assembly. You have your chapters of larger organizations like the American Humanist Association. You do have Black Nonbelievers, for example. You have student groups like with the Secular Student Alliance, Recovering from Religion, which I do help facilitate and as a partner organization. Yes, we have the ability right now to advertise on a larger scale like the religious institutions do? I'm sorry?
I feel like I may have drawn the topic a little off by suggesting that advertising was an issue. I meant more awareness.
Well, yeah.
I suppose.
And I think that's something that I do think that that's something that we should be doing more of. And I think that there has been an apprehension because when we think of church or when we think of outreach, we see the example of, people who are religious pushing their beliefs on other people, which is very intrusive. And many of us tend to shy away from that, understandably, because we don't want to infringe on people's rights the same way they have been done to us. I do think, though, that is important for us to increase our visibility and show that we are here. Not to say that, well, you just absolutely should reconsider everything and join us. But if you are interested in information and you want to, then come on. Because we do think that there should be more awareness. And this is how we capture those who didn't know that we were here before. So I think there should be a better, more efforts to at least do more outreach, and also by doing things that are considered, good works that other religious people would do. And that's how we gain that exposure, and how that's how we draw more people in as well. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stand on the corners or just push, but we can do more by the actions that we take.
Right.
Is there anything else? Is there more to it?
I actually wrote myself some notes.
While you're checking your notes,
sorry?
I was going to say, while you were checking your notes, I was just going to announce again, Valentine's Day with Secular Sexuality show is going to be followed by a Shelley Siegel concert at the Chateau Bellevue here in Austin, and tickets are $30 a person. I'm letting folks know again, and also after show dinner starting pretty soon.
Yes, and thank you to Wayne Lewis, who just made a donation to our website.
All right,
so
Wayne.
We appreciate the support.
You're getting a cheer. You're getting an audience cheer. I'm sorry, Jacob. I figured while you were looking at your notes, and then you were quicker than me, so.
Fine. I guess the only other thing I saw with that was I'm frustrated because I don't have an idea of anything, any actual things I can do to help push, even in my own part of the region of the country, things towards that direction. Because I think that religion negativity is kind of ingrained in society on a unfortunately deep level, and moving away from that is critical, but also challenging.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And what area of the country are you located?
He's in Portland.
In Portland. Oh, there are a number of secular groups in the Portland area. As a matter of fact, Black Nonbelievers has an affiliate group in Portland, Oregon. So there are a number of groups there. Are you signed up on meetup.com?
Yeah, I have an account there, but I'm not signed up to very much.
Okay. That's a really good tool. You might want to utilize that because it isn't just about these social events. If you type in secular, humanist, atheist groups in your area, you'll at least find one or two.
Yeah, even skeptics. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can search under.
And they also
great.
post any service events that they're doing as well. Like if they're participating in any service projects, cleanups, helping the homeless, or there are all types of events that are posted there. And they don't necessarily require you to be a full member unless you want to. So yes, I would definitely start there if you want to find other secular groups in your area.
Sweet.
Okay.
I think that's everything I had to talk about. Thanks for taking my call.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. And I think I want to thank everybody in the audience for coming out today and supporting us. Thank you for those subscribers that pushed us over the 250K mark. Thank you for, I feel like I'm doing like a prayer here. And thank you for the control room folks who screen the calls and, and thank you to my guest. Mandisa Thomas.
You. I don't even feel like a guest anymore, but
I'm so at home.
But it's great, yes.
Cool.
And thank you for having me for both on the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen earlier.
Hey, there you go.
And I will see you again for Parenting Beyond Belief on every fourth Sunday when I am one of the co-hosts. And I will see you out in a city near you. And please don't forget to visit blacknonbelievers.org to see if you are interested in more information about our mission, about our organization, what we do, and our events. Please do visit the website. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.